Hi, I'm Scott Birmingham, and welcome to For Your Review One-on-One. I'm lucky to have with us, down from LA and up for the Reno Film Festival, Academy Award winner, Mr. Joel Cox, a member of the American Cinema Editors. How are you doing, sir?
Fine. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing well, great. It's a privilege to have you here. I know that you are pretty much Clint Eastwood's editor. I mean, you are on his crew, you work on his films. That's not something that just happened. How did that, for you to become on his crew and his editor, how did that come to be?
Well, I was very fortunate. I think that in this business, you sometimes are in the right place at the right time. I studied through the studios. I started the ground floor in the mailroom, worked my way up from there. But in doing so, working for a studio, I was taught the entire studio system, and so I was moved around. And I worked in all the different departments like looping and sound effects and music and doing just everything you could do, even in their film library for a while. And I think on my way up, you never know what's going to happen. I know that I turned down working on television, episodic television, and not because I was against it. It's just that when I got in the studio, when I got in that department, I thought, if I'm going to try to be a feature editor, and I'm going to wait. And it was 10, 11 years I waited. Friends of mine came in behind me, got into television. They were calling me all the time, saying, "Hey, you got to come work on this show. One season, your background, you'll be cutting." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but I still want to try this." And of course, most of them would say today, "I wish I'd done what you'd done." But then again, after you work hard and all that, and you work your way through that, you have to get a break. Someone has to see something in you. You have to get an opportunity. And I was very fortunate because I worked with an editor by the name of Walter Thompson on a show called Rafferty and the Gold Dust Twins. And Dick Richards was the director, producer, and Jerry Bruckheimer was associate producer, just a fledgling starting. Well, we both were, and I worked on a couple of films for them, but Walter liked to cut, and he was older, and he liked to cut and move, and so I'd finish up. But on this particular film, he got sick, and I took over the film, and I ended up getting a co-editing credit. It was my first credit, actually, on a film, and working away from that, then we did Farewell, My Lovely. And Walter came back. We did that, and I got again, and I was very lucky. I mean, they didn't give me a credit on Rafferty because I was just too young for them. But when the second time it happened, I got the co-editing credit on Farewell, My Lovely, which opened a door for me as far as I had now a credit, which you got to start somewhere. And then I was laid off from that film, and I was out of the studio. I'd left Warner Brothers. I was working at Independent. And Rudy Fair called me up and said, "I got an interview for you. What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm open now." And so I came in, met Ferris Webster, and I called Walter and told him about it. And he called Ferris, and he knew him. And I was fortunate to get the good job. And again, here's how things fall. At the end of that film, Ferris took ill, and it was nothing. Neither one of them were any major thing to be worried about. But he had to go in and have some tests done, and so I worked with Clint at the end of the film, and I just did some things that, because of my background, because Ferris didn't have that background of assisting and working in music and all that.
Oh, gotcha.
And so the old way was just cut it, and then we'll bring a music editor and fix the music and what have you. It was the Outlaw Josie Wells, and there was this little scene around a campfire. And he wanted to cut the scene down, so I went in there and I cut the music down and the scene played. "You see, you made a cut in this?" I said, "Yeah, we cut right here." He says, "Well, you can do that?" I said, "Well, yeah, you just..." He said, "Well, we always had this mess and a bad cut." And I said, "Well, I just, my background of learning music from Kenny Woolhoyt." And he says, "Great." So we finished the film, and he just said to me that he his plan was for me to be with his team and be on his films if I was available. I said, "Well, I'm available," and here we are 36 years later. So it doesn't mean I didn't earn that and work hard for it, because you have to. I mean,
talk about that. I mean,
you have to, When the opportunity came on Farewell, My Lovely, I was ready. I had edited with Walter in the previous film, and he was of the old school like Ferris. When the director came in the room, they didn't want to. They weren't used to it, because if you know the old system was the directors were like, they were all hired like editors, art directors, composer. Everybody was, the studio was the entity. Jack Warner was the entity. It was Warner Brothers, and it was Jack Warner's film. And a film would be directed by some director, and he'd have 2 weeks to do his cuts with the editor.
So else is guns for hire.
Well, yeah, basically they had no power, because the studios were the power then.
Right.
And so the director would get 2 weeks to make his little changes, then you would sit down and Jack Warner would make the final cuts, and that's the film. And then when those guys like Jack Warner and the Mayers and the Coen brothers from Columbia, when they all sold their studios and the studio system changed, the directors became the entity. And that is what it is today. And you can't do what I did now in the studio system. You can't go into the mailroom and get into editing and work into the picture, because the editor is now hired by the director and everybody's independent. They don't carry editors. When I came in, you went to work for Warner Brothers, you had a job for life. You were like part of the family, and when you moved up in whatever it was, and I turned down, I went in there looking at sound, because I always liked electric and shops and stuff like that, and I built radios, and I loved sound. And it was, man, you're talking about mono then, and
right.
back in the world, and when it was, there wasn't like all we have today. And
right.
but I loved all that. I loved sound. I always thought I'd get into something like that. Then I was there about 6 months in the mailroom, and I got a chance to go push the bike one day for somebody sick, and it turned out to be 3 days. And after that 3 days, Rudy Fair called in his office and said, so what do you think about editing? I said, well, 3 days ago, I knew nothing about editing. But I said, I'm very intrigued by it, and I really like it. And he says, well, the next time we have an opening, it'll be yours. I got great reports from everybody, how you worked and your personality. He says, I want to give you that opportunity.
So you've been in the business at that point how many years?
Well, I got in, well, it says that we have to back up here for a little bit. Because how long I've been in the business? I've been in the business my entire life. I'm second generation. My dad was a stand-in extra, and I did small bit parts and things. I was the baby in Random Harvest in 1942. I was 6 weeks old. And
That on the resume.
that's bad on the resume. Well, it's in my bio and some things. But I was in front of the camera up until age 12. And I did a film called The Eddie Cantor Story, and this small bit in it. And Keith Purcell took a liking to me, and I don't know how this all worked out, but they decided to carry me through because they had other scenes where kids were going to be in. And so they dressed me and put me in the back of them, because I had a front shot, so I couldn't be there. And I was gone for 5 weeks from school. When I got through it, I just told my folks, look, I was bored on the set. I like to be doing that. My dad taught me how to build, because he did carpentry work on the side and built homes and did things like that, and I helped him. And so I like to always do things with my hands, and this sitting around on the stage was like, wow. For me, I need to be doing something.
Right.
And so I said, well, later on, and my dad, through Hoyt Bowers, who had a casting, he's the one that put my name into the mailroom to get in, and it took 3 interviews and 9 months to open the door.
Wow.
Because the head of the department thought for sure that I wanted to be an actor, and they didn't want somebody in the mailroom who was going to hang out in the sets. So I tried to, and that's a story in itself, because after the third interview, or after the second interview, Mr. Bowers was not happy, because my dad knew him quite well, and so he went up to Bill Schaefer, Jack Warner's right hand, and told him what had happened, and they called down there and told him to hire me. So it took even that to open the door to get in the mailroom.
Wow.
So, and it's much harder today. It's pretty much, you don't have a studio where you can go in and kind of meet people and kind of go off in directions in the studios. You can if you're going to go into publicity and the financial parts of it, but the artistic parts of it is camera, art direction, editing, property, costumes, makeup. It's a very difficult, hard to get in business.
So now once you and Clint are together, if you will, and now you're editing, what did you find or even for Clint for that matter, what was going to be the key component to your working relationship? You as an editor and him as a director, having his film be put together, basically. Was it a kind of a silent communication you had, or heavy discussions about it, or you go off and do your thing and then call me when you're done?
Well, I have worked on shows prior to working for Clint where the director would tell you during dailies, I want that, and I want that angle, and I want this piece. Clint he's a whole different school. He's the school of, he hires people and he trusts them for what they know to do, and he doesn't want to inhibit them. He wants them to bring what they see. Now, I can remember when we did Unforgiven, Eddie Iona was the prop master, and he brought all these guns in, and he had them all laid out who he thought what character was going to get, and Clint walked in there in 5 minutes, picked all the guns, and walked out. And that's how he is, because he trusts the people. And he has always been, with editing, is I want you to put it together. I want to see what you see. He says the one thing about editing, it's the one part where you can edit a film, and then we can make changes, and we can always put it back, and it's not something that when you're shooting, it's now, and you got to get it. But he believes in first instinct, and he said when he gave me the reins when Ferris retired, he said to me, I got one piece of advice. I said this before. He said, first instinct. Don't go home and think about it and come back and recut. I want to see what the first instincts are. He says, most of the time, your first instincts are correct. He says, I've worked with directors as an actor, and they're not sure of themselves, so we try this, and it's a trial and error. He says, you got to go in there confident, knowing what you're doing. And he says, my key was, when I started to direct, was I was going to hire the best people I could get around me, because that way I knew they were going to make me a better director. And a lot of directors today want to tell everybody how to do it, and so they inhibit the, right as from the actor on down, they inhibit the person. And, you know, I use that motto. I mean, I read the script one time. Mm-hmm. I never read it again, because when I get the film, I look at the dailies, and then when I'm going to go to work on a sequence, I just run through the sequence, each of the pieces again, and I make notes of it, and then I just pick it up. And I've seen now, once on the screen and once in my room, I've seen all the material for a particular sequence, and then it's an instinct, and I just edit the scene.
Well, let me ask you one last thing before we wrap this up, because we're getting short on time here. When you won your Oscar for Unforgiven, yes, what was that like? Do you still recall that moment and when it happened? And what the feel was working on that versus the feel of working on the next Oscar-nominated one, $1 Million Baby? Talk about that for a minute.
Well, I firmly believe that if you are nominated, you have won. There's like 450 pictures released each year, and if you're one of 5 films nominated by your peers, you have won, because they have deemed your work to be worthy of mention in those 5 pictures. And if you're fortunate, and I say fortunate because 6,000 people vote, and nobody knows how that's going to go. There's every year, if you watch the Oscars or even any other award shows, where you think, God, I saw that person, they were really great, and they're nominated, and they don't win. And you think, God, how could that person's work, or that actor, or that director, you know? I mean, you can go back, Steven Spielberg has a couple of times where films got nominated for Best Picture and you get nominated for Director. I mean, you're lucky, you really are. But if your name's in that envelope, you're the luckiest person in the world. And I can tell you, to this day, I still remember, because a good friend of mine was sitting next to me, Frank Uriosity, and he was nominated, and they called my name, and I sat there dumbfounded. I know my wife was sitting there, and we're both staring out there, and he taps me, you got to go. You know, and you don't see that because, you know, the minute they name the picture, they do a little clip of what the film is.
Right.
So nobody sees that. But nobody saw what happened earlier. And this was the second award of the night. And Marissa Tomei won for My Cousin Vinny. And she goes up the stairs there to step up on the stage, and she stumbles on the stair and almost falls. So you're sitting there. Now I get out, and I'm walking up there. I know they're not on me, but all I'm thinking about is those stairs. And I don't even see them bring the award out. I don't see it. I get up there and I just turn around, and there's Tim there, because Tim was he presented the award to me, Tim Robbins, and you turn around and you can't see anything because of all the lights,
right? And
your heart just starts pounding, and it's something that you don't forget.
I was gonna say.
And I was honored again with a nomination, and I feel so honored to be nominated that I feel I've always won. And in that year, I really got paid a tremendous compliment by Hillary. The day after the awards, we won 4 awards that night: picture, director, supporting actor, and actress. And they did a in the round little interview with James Lipton. And I was there, and they did this thing, and she comes out, and she's got her Oscars. They put them on the table. The minute the interview, they put them down. They said, okay, that's enough of those things. That's Clint. He's very down to earth. And she comes out, and she sees me, and she just wells up in tears. And she comes over to me and hugs me and gives me a kiss and says, you and I both know I have this because of you. I cannot be paid a higher compliment than that from anybody in my life. I know the work I did in that film, and I told her way on early in that film. I'd see her when they were shooting in Los Angeles. I'd go out on the set, and I told her, wow, girl, something special here. And she says, you told me that. And I said, yeah, I told you, and I'm so happy for you. So.
Well, thanks, Joel, for being here very much.
Absolutely.
For those of you who don't know, Unforgiven, which you won the Oscar for, is one of the 100 most memorable films according to American Film Institute. So I'm very privileged to have the very editor here and enjoying and celebrating the Reno Film Festival. I'm Scott Birmingham, and this is One-on-One with Joel Cox, and this is for your review.